Friends, welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Seems rather strange because it started 3 weeks ago, and if you're here for the first time, you've almost missed it because it ends tonight. But many of you, I know, have been here throughout these 3 weeks. It's an enormous pleasure to welcome our guests this evening. We thank RBS for their sponsorship of this event. We hope we're going to have a wonderful hour. We'll talk about all kinds of things. We haven't quite worked out how we do it, except we're going to have some fun. Please welcome Salman Rushdie. Now, the first thing people should know is it's terribly funny.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, I think so. And
well, you would, but
yeah. I mean, what happened is when I was writing it, and I started writing it. I mean, it's quite a weird book. You know?
We'll come to that.
Yeah, and I got worried about it, and I normally don't show anybody anything while I'm writing. But when I'd written about, I don't know, 50 or 60 pages of a first version of it, I called my agent, Andrew Wiley, and I said, could you just read it for me and tell me if it's good weird or bad weird? and Andrew is, you know, relentlessly honest,
yes,
which is good.
So what did he say?
Well, he read it, and he called me up and he said, look, I don't completely know where you're going with this because it could go in a number of directions.
And neither did you.
Because I see you've got quite a couple, 2 or 3 storylines. He said, well, what I will say is it's the funniest thing of yours I've ever read. So I thought, okay, that's comforting. If Andrew Wiley, Andrew Wiley, laughs, then maybe it'll be easy to make other people laugh.
What's interesting about that answer is, of course, you're talking about, we'll come to this later, but you're talking about a society, American contemporary society, which you clearly think is falling apart, is rudderless, is one that leaves people hopelessly floundering and all the rest of it. And the only way...
So unlike this one.
Well... but as ever, they do it on a different scale. The way you're dealing with this, I mean, your anger is challenged through humor, is channeled through humor. Now, how did you get there? When did you decide to go back and read Cervantes, and why?
Well, what happened was about 4 years ago was this famous double anniversary of both Cervantes and Shakespeare, and a year before that, when people were preparing for all of that, I got asked if I would write something about that. And I also knew that there would be some events like this at literary festivals, yes, where we would be asked to talk about that. So I thought I'd better read this book again, because I hadn't read the book since I was 20 years old, and at college. And the thing is that back then, when I was 20 years old, the standard available translation, a Penguin Classics translation by a gentleman called J.M. Cohen, was really boring. I mean, it was a very dull...
It didn't sparkle.
No, it was turgid, and you tried to force your way through it, and you thought, I don't get why people say this is the greatest novel ever written, because it seems really awful to me, What had happened...
I hope he's no longer with us.
I'm so, yes, sorry, J.M.
Anyway, carry on.
Anyway, in the intervening 50 years, that had changed. And I mean, there's now certainly one absolutely brilliant translation by Edith Grossman. And reading it was like reading a completely new book. It was like reading something contemporary and vivid and funny and inspirational.
Well, the fun we'll get to, but one of the interesting things about this book, and I think it's fair enough to say this because it hits you in the second chapter or the third chapter, is that what we're talking about is a character who is invented by a rather second-rate spy novelist, yeah, which I think you say is something you've always wanted to be.
I've always wanted to be a second-rate spy novelist, yes.
Well, you might be a first-rate, well, who knows. Anyway, and it turns out that KeyShot, and we'll come to pronunciation as well,
yes,
is somebody who is invented. Now, there is a bit in the second volume of the original Cervantes story where Quixote, here we go, we're getting into trouble already. But anyway, Quixote goes into a shop and finds a book, which is the part 2 of Don Quixote, and he opens it and says, I didn't do any of these things.
No, it's a forgery.
And is that where you got the idea of the mirror?
Well, not exactly. What it is that there's a point, in fact, in the first volume, where Cervantes pretends that what he has found is a story written by someone else. You know, and he has there's an ostensible author
Yes.
who is actually Arab, Sidi Hamete Benengeli. Apparently wrote the book that Cervantes has discovered and is now offering to us
Yes.
as Don Quixote. So it gave me the thought that I might do something I've never done before, which is to write something about writing something.
Yeah.
You know, I've always kind of rather avoided that self-conscious book about a book thing.
Don't worry, we'll try to keep this clear as we go on.
And so what it is you first meet my character KeyShot and his sidekick / imaginary child,
Who doesn't exist.
who may or may not exist. That depends on your point of view.
Yes.
He starts off in black and white, and he gradually arrives in full color, with the help of a talking cricket who speaks Italian. It's a very simple story. And then you discover in chapter 2 that there's actually an author who is writing this story. Sam Duchamp, not to be confused with the singer of Wooly Bully.
And the hero is called Smile, Smile. So you get the feeling.
Anyway, so we discovered that this second-rate spy novelist, as you say, has decided to write a different sort of book in order to help him work through his own life crises, you know. And so the story, these two storylines kind of alternate in the book. And actually, I wasn't intending to do that. I mean, when I first thought about the book, I didn't think there would be that second storyline at all. You know, I thought it would just be about my KeyShot and his sidekick's son.
Why did you find it springing out of nowhere and catching you by the neck?
Well, I mean, nobody can say why it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It just did come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then I really for a while was not sure if it belonged in the book or not. You know, and I reserved the right with myself to take it out. You know, and I just thought I'm going to go down this road for a bit.
So when you sent the first 60 pages to your agent, Andrew Wiley,
it was both. It was both.
And you were wondering yourself.
I was uncertain, yeah. And then what happened as I went on with writing is that these two stories kind of started talking to each other. They started mirroring and echoing and being sort of variant versions of each other. And I ended up thinking that was good. I liked it, and so it stayed in.
And we should say that the character KeyShot, and you provide a very helpful pronunciation guide
on page
1, which it goes through the 5, 6, or 7 Quixotes and all the rest of it. And you say, look, forget it, it's KeyShot. So can we, no questions on that, please, thank you very much.
Yes.
It is settled. You like the French
It's the
approach.
French pronunciation, but it's basically a key and a shot, you put them together.
Exactly.
But actually, the strange thing about the X is that in Spanish, that X, in the time of Cervantes, that X would have been pronounced like a sh.
Yeah.
You know, so in his, they would of course have pronounced the E. So Cervantes would probably have said Quixote.
Yeah.
You know, the X turning into a H sound
Is much later.
Is much later.
And everyone thinks they're being right when they say Quixote, emphasizing the H.
The H, but for example, even now in Portuguese, the X is pronounced like a sh.
Yeah, it's almost a J.
Yeah. And the French has always been KeyShot, and the German is Quixote, and the Italian is Quixote.
So you've taken
So
the middle road.
So, you know, I have the kind of majority on my side.
Before we get into the details of this, I mean, the character KeyShot, if you look at the old man in the original, he's melancholic.
Yes.
And
he's the knight of the dolorous countenance.
and your KeyShot is, I mean, he gets angry, but he's not melancholic
He's
at
not.
all.
He's actually quite sweet-natured.
Yes. Why did you decide to make that change?
Well, I didn't want him to be an exact imitation.
Yeah.
Of
Yes.
Cervantes,
No. Quite. You were using that as a starting point.
Yeah. Instead of having the kind of mournful face
Yeah.
that we know,
Yes.
he's actually quite cheerful.
He is.
And he's charming. You know, he charms people.
He's charming and hopeless.
And useless. You know, and borderline nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, not even borderline.
I was going to say, I think you're being a wee bit kind there. He's in pursuit of
Of a
an
woman he doesn't know.
untouchable TV.
No, and I thought,
star.
I thought reading Don Quixote, when he falls in love with this girl in an adjoining village,
Yes.
who may well be a prostitute, by the way, and renames her. I mean, her
Yes.
real name is Aldonza, but he renames her Dulcinea because it's more fittingly aristocratic and romantic. And he doesn't know her,
No.
but he keeps sending her messages through people that he meets.
And if you translate that,
I
to
thought
the
if that
current
happened
era,
now, that might not be seen as romantic. You know, that might be seen as
well, it's
something less
falling in
pleasant.
love with a distant TV
with,
star.
the person you don't know. Anyway, so he falls in love with this woman on the screen, you know, who's a TV host, a daytime TV host, like somebody describes her as Oprah 2.0. You know, so the only woman in America more famous than her is Oprah Winfrey, or maybe Michelle Obama. So she's the definition of the unattainable.
Yes.
You know, but because he's crazy, driven mad by watching too much television, and beginning to believe that he knows these people on television, he thinks that he can, if he proves himself worthy, that he has a chance of winning her hand in what he calls the age of anything can happen.
With this imaginary Sancho Panza
Kid.
by his side.
He wanted a
who's
son.
kid.
He's never had a son. So he discovers...
And he wants a woman, so he
wants a
can't have
woman.
a son without that.
Well, he does have the son without the woman, actually.
Yes.
He has the son first,
Yes, but
which
it's
is unusual.
But it's a magic realism son, isn't it? Really, and we know
Yes,
about
he has
them.
the son. He has the
they
son
come
with
and
the
they
aid
go.
of a magical meteor shower.
But as he travels around America, contemporary America, and you remind us all the time about the population of Seattle, the population of New York, the population, of course, of Mumbai, which pops up, and of London, and you have this wonderful way of kind of throwing all this information into the pot. So we're bamboozled in our reflection of the way we live our lives now, with this sort of endless tide of fact, and what it means, maybe nothing.
And factoid.
And, you know, there's a town in here which pops up quite a lot called Beautiful,
Yes.
Kansas.
Yes.
Now tell us about Beautiful
Well,
Kansas.
there's no such place. But
Just as well. I mean, I don't know if they'd
but
like
what
it.
I did when I was sort of working the book out, I read about a murder that had taken place in Kansas of a couple of shooting of two Indian American like software engineers who were in a bar, and somebody came and shot them. One of them died, one of them didn't die, and in Kansas. And this was in a town called Olathe, O-L-A-T-H-E. And I thought, well, I don't want it to be exactly like that, because I don't want the people to have to be the real people. I want to be able to make them up and so on. And so I changed the name to Beautiful, because I discovered that the name Olathe is a Native American word meaning beautiful. And so that just gave me a way of putting it at 10-degree angle to the truth, you know, and
Magnetic North.
yeah, exactly, and just being allowed to fictionalize it. You know? So, I mean, some of the places in the book are real places. Some of the places are these slight variations. I mean, there isn't a town in New Jersey called Beringer where people turn into mastodons yet. But there is a real town exactly where I locate this imaginary town, which is not unlike the imaginary town.
And of course, you've taken us into the meat of the book in a way that it is the story of contemporary America. It's dislocation, one part from another. It's obsession with the moment. It's obsession with image in the form of television. It's obsession with fame. But you've decided that the only way to fire a kind of an arrow into all this is to be funny.
Yeah, I mean, I like funny. You know, I don't like books that have no sense of humor. I mean, I've got into real trouble before, but I'll say it again. It's one of my problems with George Eliot.
You did get into quite a bit of trouble.
Well, but not about that. It's been a problem of mine with people like George Eliot, you know, who I acknowledge the genius.
Yes.
But there's not a lot of humor in George Eliot, you know.
Oh.
You don't giggle a lot while you read George Eliot.
Yeah,
You do?
no. Well, not a lot, but I mean...
Anyway, the point is, yes, it came out as this kind of... I mean, what I liked... The thing that I did like about Don Quixote is the form of the picaresque novel.
Yeah.
You know, the
wanderings.
Yeah, I mean the word picaresque comes to the word picaro means a sort of rogue or chancer.
Yeah.
You know, and he goes.
Well, it's a knight errant, really.
He goes down life's road,
yeah,
and things happen to him, and so it becomes a road novel. And of course, in America, there's this long tradition of the road novel and the road movie. You know, you've everything from Lolita to Easy Rider. You know, and so I was thinking about that. And the great thing about both the picaresque novel and the road format is it allows the book to change all the time, because you know, as so to speak, and it's true about life as well. That as you go down life's road,
a new scene opens.
You come to different places in different moments, and things happen differently. You know, so it gave me a way of writing a book in which the figure of Quixote making his journey would unite a lot of different kinds of America, a lot of different sort of styles of writing. There's a bit of it which becomes a spy novel. There's a bit of it which is a science fiction novel. There's a bit of it which is a kind of absurdist parable, and all of that is strung together by the road.
But of course, if you just have somebody who goes wandering around, apparently aimlessly, meeting different kinds of people, having, you know, adventure here and adventure there.
Not enough.
There's, you know, what's the point?
No point.
So what makes it congeal?
Well, I think two things which are two aspects of the same thing. One is that he's in pursuit of love. That's his goal.
And can't find it.
And thinks he knows how to, believes himself capable of finding it.
But he's deluded.
But he's deluded, yeah. But what the pursuit of love makes him want to do is to be a better person. You know, he talks all the time about making himself worthy. That he wants to, he's very invested in the idea of goodness, of being good.
That's right.
And that's, I think, the thing that holds the book together, that wherever he goes and whatever's happening to him, he's interested in the business of proving himself worthy. And he has that sort of in common with his author in the other storyline, who is also somebody in later life contemplating the mistakes of his life and wanting to set things right and to be a better person.
What, of course, is funny about this, fundamentally, is that Quixote thinks that he can apply the 7 rules of seven valleys. 7 valleys. And they include, you know, wisdom, love, and all the rest of it. And he has this rather touching faith that if you accept these rules of nature, and if you go through the fire, like the blooming magic flute or something,
exactly, then
you will come out the end and you'll be all right. And of course, it is completely ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, he says at this point, in the valley of love, Quixote said, one's goal is the pursuit of love itself. Not the small, though often beautiful individual love of one man for one woman, or one man for one man, or one woman for woman, or whatever more contemporary combination you prefer. And in this category, I include my love for my own destined, inevitable, soon-to-be beloved. This is the woman on the TV screen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuts.
Yes, it's nuts.
But he's forced to walk across a landscape
and
that is unconnected.
And he believes deeply that if he behaves according to the principles he has set himself, that love will find a way. And not to give anything away, well, I won't give it away. I won't give it away.
No, don't. Okay, we won't talk about the end of the book.
Yeah.
But look, if you had been writing this, living in America, 50 years ago, in the 60s, what would have been different about the way you looked at the landscape, the society, and the people?
Well, America was used to be. I mean, the book, I think, that answers that question is Saul Bellows' novel, The Adventures of Augie Marsh, in which Augie Marsh, from a poor Jewish family in Chicago, in a way sets off, his life becomes a kind of odyssey through America. But the America that's being written about is described much more optimistically, you know, as a place of energy and drama and people who are competent and able to grasp life and make it what they want, you know, etc. And so Bellows' America, which I mean, I remember reading The Adventures of Augie Marsh when I was much younger and loving it. Just thinking this is...
Well, there's the sense of the horizon that will always take you ever westward towards the sun.
Exactly. There's a wonderful... I'm going to try and remember, and if you forgive me if I get it slightly wrong, the ending of Augie Marsh, when he talks about... He says, I have been a Columbus of the near at hand. And he says something like, I'm setting forth into the terra firma that spreads out from every gaze.
Well, you see...
that sense of the discovery of the world. And then there's this beautiful ending where he says, Columbus probably thought he was a failure too when they brought him home in chains, which didn't prove there was no America.
I think that, I mean, it's a lovely phrase, that, because the sort of phrase that Quixote attaches to himself is that it's an anything can happen place. But involved in that label is the idea that it might not be a very good thing.
No, it's catastrophe.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we talked about whether we were going to mention the word
the word
of the 45th,
hovering on our lips.
The 45th president. But
I mean, it has to be said, he's not mentioned in them.
No, his name isn't there because
his footprints are on every page.
I didn't want him in my fucking book, you know.
I was just trying to get him to say that.
I mean, he's in all our daily lives every day.
Yes.
I just thought I don't want him. I'm not going to put him in. So let's call him 45.
Yes, 45.
And I mean, if that person can be the president of the United States, then anything can happen.
Yeah, even magic really.
There used to be this footballer playing for Arsenal Football Club, who was a fullback, Lee Dixon, who played once for England. He was lousy. And my club, Spurs, when the Arsenal would come to play, they would sing, "If Lee Dixon can play for England, so can I."
You're not in London next Sunday, are you?
No, I'm sadly not.
You know, we're playing.
I know.
Anyway.
Well, we always beat you these days, so it's all right.
Anyway,
apologies in advance.
Okay.
But I mean, that's what Trump is. He's, if Donald Trump can be president, so can I. Except I can't because I'm not allowed to by law.
But being serious for a moment, leaving that subject to the side, the society that you picture here, the society through which Quixote wanders, unknowing, hopeful, slightly bonkers, but not at all an unlikable figure, a bizarre figure, is one that you obviously sense has changed for the worse in the last generation.
Yeah, and had done so before Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
Exactly.
That Trump, in some ways, was an effect rather than a cause. And then worked very hard to make that rift deeper.
I've got a phrase which comes back to me quite a lot. If you look at Alistair Cook's series America, the TV series, which I think was broadcast on the BBC in 1972, and those of you who remember, it was a time when civilization and the ascent of man had been these great, sort of majestic TV series.
Yeah, and that was the
Cook's
year
America,
I first ever went to America.
Cook's America was on, and there's a scene at the very end, almost at the end of the film. He gazes with that sort of quizzical expression at the camera, and he's talking about a country that he loved, of which he became a citizen in the 50s and so on, and had more or less lived there permanently since the 1930s. And he said, in this land of the blandest cynicism and the most persistent idealism, the race is on between its decadence and its vitality. Now that's a really good way of summing up the country that you're picturing here, which you enjoy and where you live and so on.
And actually connects to what we were saying about bellows America in which that vitality
Yes.
was so central,
Yeah.
and now
And unquenchable.
and unquenchable, and joyous,
And you think, in a way, the decadence, whether it's in politics, in finance, in social cohesion, and so on, is now taken over.
Well, I think allow me rather unusually to use a religious phrase,
Yeah.
which is original sin, and it seems to me that sometimes nations have an original sin. And the original sin of America is twofold. One is the eradication of the original population, and the other is slavery, and its consequence, which is racism.
Well, race, I talked not long ago to a presidential candidate in the 2016 election, and it wasn't Donald Trump, who described, so it leaves you with little imaginative leaps to be made, and she, just to make it clearer, said
Gene
that,
Stein.
said said that there is no question that in America the original sin, and she used that phrase, was race.
Well, it's the explanation behind everything that's happening.
Yeah.
This year actually is rather an extraordinary year in American history because 1619 is the year in which the first slave ship arrived in America. So 400 years ago is when the first slaves arrived.
And next year is the Mayflower.
And next year, so
So the two things.
slaves got there first. But that fact has shaped American history ever since and has never really been apologized for. There's never been any reparations.
If it's that bad, why do you live there?
Well, I don't live in America, I live in New York.
Well, yeah.
But seriously, I think it's very often the case in countries that the great metropolis is not like the country it's in.
Yeah.
I don't think London is particularly like Britain.
No.
Paris is not like France. And New York is not like America.
But it's the curious thing about America is that people, in let's say the rural Midwest, who would tend to be more sympathetic, even dramatically sympathetic, to Trump than people living in, Seattle or New York, will say these people live in a bubble. But the bubbles that you get in rural Texas are much more impenetrable than any bubble you would get in New York.
The question is, who's in the bubble?
Yeah. I knew this.
I wanted in my last novel, in The Golden House, that book was set almost entirely in Manhattan.
Yes.
And I remember when I finished the book, telling myself, get out of town. You can't just write about this tiny little safe area in which you feel at home. And so, in this book, I quite deliberately got out of town. And the book, much of the book.
Yeah.
There's more than one journey. There's Quixote's journey east from the Midwest. And then there are reverse journeys as well. So there's 2 or 3 crisscrossing journeys going on in this book. And so a lot of the book takes place in this other America.
Yeah, Wisconsin or Kansas.
Kansas and places, the red states.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I had to learn when you go to America, because here, red is the color of the left and blue is the color of the right.
Yes.
And in America, it's the other way around.
Absolutely.
Red is the color of conservatism, and blue are the good guys.
Couldn't possibly comment.
No. So I did want to try and, I've been there for almost 20 years. And I mean, and in that time, I've actually traveled really quite a lot in America. And what I didn't do was do the journey that Quixote does.
No.
I thought about it. I thought maybe I should go to the Midwest and rent a Chevy Cruze and drive across America exactly as he does. Then I thought, no, too literal. Most of the places are places I actually have been to, or who are versions of places that I've been to. So I felt on confident ground that I could create that world. And then the thing that I had to face, I've actually very little in my life written about racism. I mean, actually in the Satanic Verses, there's a bit.
Yes.
But American racism, I really hadn't taken it on, and since most of the characters are Indian, the leading characters are Indian American, that is very interesting to me because you know, the classic, as we've been saying, the classic location of race in America is between African Americans
Yes.
and white supremacists. But Indian Americans have this funny in-between position.
We should make clear for older members of the audience, including myself, that when Salman mentions Indian Americans, he's not talking about
I'm not talking
Native Americans. He's talking about
people from the South, people from South Asia.
From
So
South
there's
Asia,
this,
what we
there's
used
this
to call the
awful thing that people sometimes say in America, and it really annoys people, where they say dot, not feather. Dot, you know, not feather.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful.
That's a very politically incorrect way of describing it.
Well, look, the family at the centre of this book, KeyShot, who's the invention of Sam, the second-rate spy novelist, is a man whose name could be translated, because his first name is Ismail and he smiles, so it could be Smile, Smile.
Ismail, or Smile, Smile.
And his cousin, he's a cousin, isn't he?
Yeah.
Dr. Smile
Yeah.
runs a pharmaceutical company from which he's eventually
Fired.
let go, is the phrase.
Yeah.
Now, it strikes me that if you're looking at the social turmoil of the States at the moment, which takes all sorts of forms, the opioid crisis, which doesn't get that much treatment here, is
Colossal.
It's colossal, and it's more profound
In the red states.
in the red states,
Yeah.
in the rural areas, than it is in the big cities where they've gone through all the drugs and AIDS and all the rest of it. But people are discovering. I mean, New Hampshire is a very good example of places where extraordinary numbers of people are dying
Deeply addicted.
because of their addiction to prescription drugs, which over a long period have been prescribed unnecessarily by medics who make money out of prescribing them. I mean, it's a social crisis of huge proportion.
Yeah, and yes, because if you're going to set a lot of the book in that part of America, then you need to recognize that that's what's going on there, you know. And so I sort of dug around a little bit, and I actually found an Indian American gentleman. He's now in jail, so I think we could say officially that he's a crook. Who was, who is like my Dr. Smile. I mean, he's different in that, my Dr. Smile's operation is in Atlanta, Georgia, and this fellow was somewhere else in like Illinois somewhere. But he had come to America and started up a pharmaceutical company and done very well. And then invented his breakthrough thing was his company invented this sublingual spray of the very powerful opioid fentanyl. Fentanyl is what killed Prince. Sublinguals had worked very, very fast. It gets into your system fastest. And this was designed exclusively for use with terminal cancer patients, in order to overcome what doctors call breakthrough pain, which means unbearable pain. So he became very wealthy because it was very successful, this product. But unfortunately, he was a crook. And so what he started doing was bribing doctors to prescribe this product, what's called off-label, which means not for the purposes for which the label specifies. In other words, recreationally, even. And that's one of the. He was one of the people who did this. The OxyContin family, the Sacklers, they have kind of their hands dirty as well. And the thing that struck me was not just that there are individual crooked people, which there are, but how easy it was for relatively small amounts of money to corrupt the medical profession. The amounts of money that doctors were being given to do this, they were like $25,000, $40,000. Not like money that would allow you to buy a yacht. And for that, they were willing to prescribe large quantities of these lethal drugs to anyone who wanted it.
But of course, one of the reasons that the satire works is that what you're saying is that you're offering people a way of escaping from the world. Escaping what's around them.
I think one of the things that I really thought, writing the book, I mean, the book, I promise you it is funny. I mean, we're not making it sound funny. But actually, even my crooked Dr. Smile, I mean, I'm extremely fond of him. He's
quite engaging.
He's a kind of delightful crook. He's just also lethal, which is a fault. But I felt, how shall I put this? The loneliness of America. How many people are isolated from each other, and how they need things to help them face that loneliness.
And who feel, whether they're, liberal Americans, vaguely on the liberal left side of politics, or whether they are conservatives, even, serious Trumpites, there's a feeling among so many of them that something has been lost.
Yeah.
They're not quite sure what it is, but it's gone.
And that people are lying to them.
Yes.
I mean, I remember I went to lecture a year or so ago in Florida in a little town called Vero Beach, which is near Cape Canaveral, and which is absolutely Trump country.
Yeah.
And I was lecturing to a large audience, or actually even bigger than this, if that were possible.
Yes.
And I would say 95% of it was people who had voted Republican. And yet they were completely not like the cliche of the Trump voter.
Yeah.
These were not ignorant blue collar.
No.
They were white collar, they college educated, had good jobs, many of them were retirees. They were book readers. I mean, why else would they come to listen to me,
Yeah.
And yet, they had completely swallowed the Kool-Aid, so I would have this, the Q&A, a gentleman would stand up, very, cultured gentleman,
Yes.
and he would say, so do you really think that the New York Times isn't just lying to us every day? You really believe that? And I thought, well, humor is the way of dealing with this. So I said, well, sir, I'm aware of the fact that I'm in Florida, the home of Florida Man. But back home where I come from, it's our hometown newspaper and we like it. I said, so yes, I do believe it, except when they're reviewing my books. And somebody else, stood up and made a kind of statement denying climate change. And he said, when you say all that about climate change, and how all the scientists in the world agree with you, that's not true. And I said, well, actually, yes, it is true. He said, no, it's not. So then I had to say to him, I said, sir, we can't stand here going, yes, it is, no, it's not, because that's silly.
Exactly.
I said, but let me put it to you this way. If you believe the world is flat, the earth doesn't need you to believe that it's round to be round. It just is round, even if you don't believe it, because there's this thing called evidence. Maybe you should consider that. But it was, first of all, I liked it that they didn't. It was not rude, it was not discourteous. They listened.
Yes.
The form of conversation was courteous.
Non-Trumpist, in other words.
And nobody threw things or walked out or
Yeah.
anything, And I thought, okay, at least we're having the conversation, which in America it's getting harder and harder to do.
Before we go to questions, which I want to do in a couple of minutes, or 3 or 4 minutes, I do want to read a little section, if you can think of an appropriate one.
You want me to think of?
Well, just give us you don't have to do it by heart.
No.
I've got a pristine copy here.
No,
just a little, a couple of minutes.
Find a bit.
But let me just ask you one general question
Yeah.
before we open it up, while you think about that and can find it.
All right.
We all know what happened to you 30 years ago. This year. And I remember we had a conversation on The World at One, which was on the very day that this news came from Tehran. Have you in your own life dealt with the aftermath of that?
Yeah.
Successfully, do you think?
I think
Is it
so.
far enough away now?
Yeah, I mean it's 20 years away. I mean it really only ever comes up when I'm talking to journalists.
Yes. Yeah. I just thought some people might think it odd if I didn't allude to
No, well, you can
something.
allude.
And
But if I asked you about something that happened to you 30 years ago, you might think that was a bit...
Well, one of the things that happened to me 30 years ago was saying to you in the radio, we've just had this news from Tehran that you've been sentenced to death. So, I mean, that was quite a moment.
Yeah, well, as regards me and the Ayatollah Khomeini, one of us is dead.
We'll leave it there. Give us a little passage.
Let me just read the beginning, since this is the first event for this book.
Yeah, that's good.
So let me read the beginning. This is how it begins. Chapter 1. KeyShot, an old man, falls in love, embarks on a quest, and becomes a father. It has long chapter titles. There once lived at a series of temporary addresses across the United States of America a traveling man of Indian origin, advancing years, and retreating mental powers, who, on account of his love for mindless television, had spent far too much of his life in the yellow light of tawdry motel rooms, watching in excess of it, and had suffered a peculiar form of brain damage as a result. He devoured morning shows, daytime shows, late-night talk shows, soaps, situation comedies, Lifetime movies, hospital dramas, police series, vampire and zombie serials, the dramas of housewives from Atlanta, New Jersey, Beverly Hills, and New York, the romances and quarrels of hotel fortune princesses and self-styled shahs, the cavortings of individuals made famous by happy nudities, the 15 minutes of fame accorded to young persons with large social media followings on account of their plastic surgery acquisition of a third breast, or their post-rib removal figures that mimicked the impossible shape of the Mattel company's Barbie doll, or even more simply, their ability to catch giant carp in picturesque settings while wearing only the tiniest of string bikinis, as well as singing competitions, cooking competitions, competitions for business propositions, competitions for business apprenticeships, competitions between remote-controlled monster vehicles, fashion competitions, competitions for the affections of both bachelors and bachelorettes, baseball games, basketball games, football games, wrestling bouts, kickboxing bouts, extreme sports programming, and of course, beauty contests. He did not watch hockey. For people of his ethnic persuasion and tropical youth, hockey, which in the USA was renamed field hockey, was a game played on grass. To play field hockey on ice was, in his opinion, the absurd equivalent of ice skating on a lawn.
And we can confirm. And unfortunately, we can't confirm the rumors that people have finally banned daytime television watching in the White House.
Oh, did they? No, they can't possibly have. What would he have to do all day?
On that happy note, can we have the lights up and get some questions? We've got a little time. Hands up, mics will reach you. There's one up there, certainly, and one here. So I think you get first shout, and then that one. So, yeah, fire away if you've got the mic. Just second row, that's it.
Yeah, your comment about the original sins, too, of America, the eradication of the indigenous population and the slavery. Do you think there's a way for redemption?
Well, strangely, many of us thought that had begun with the election of a black president. And in fact, what happened was the opposite. That the election of the presence of a black man in the White House so much outraged a section of white America as to give it extra energy, a kind of energy that it hadn't had before. Yeah. Whether that's temporary or permanent, I don't know. We'll find out next year. I'm actually more optimistic about the situation in America than the situation in the other two countries that I've cared about, which is to say India and this one. The Trump victory was very, very small. It was very narrow. In the 3 northern industrial states which he should have lost and which he won, the total vote in his favor, majority in his favor, was only 75,000 votes. So the number of people required to swing in order to lose those states is
and
very...
of course he lost the popular vote by nearly 3
He lost
million.
his popular vote by nearly 3 million, but you've got to play the game according to the rules as set. It's possible to see a reversal there. Whether it'll happen or not, I mean, unfortunately, the Democrats have an enormous gift for losing elections, for the circular firing squad, And I see the circular firing squad begin to form right now. We'll see. I mean, I think there are actually good signs. I mean, I was wrong last time. I thought Trump would lose. I had this in common with Donald Trump, who I think, if you see the pictures of election night, you see a man in deep shock. What, I've really got to do this job now? And afterwards, he gave this interview in which he said, it's much harder than the job I had before, with an air of surprise, as if it hadn't occurred to him that running the United States might be more complicated than running a real estate company. But yeah, and I think it is changeable. I worry much more for the irreversibility of the decision that this country is about to make. And I worry even more about what's happening in India, where the rise of Hindu nationalism is a tidal wave of popularity, and that the government there is, I mean, it's there for as long as it wants to be, and seems to be unleashed as a result. Things that are happening in the country are really very tragic right now. So oddly, I think of these three countries, the place to have a little bit more optimism about is the United States. I think it can change.
Someone has the mic up here, I think.
I do, yeah. Thank you.
Where?
So much.
Sorry.
Oh,
Where are you? Wave.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
you
There.
are.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
sorry, I thought there was a duplication issue, but it's just one of them. Thank you so much. This was a delight. I'm interested to hear you say that the way to deal with questions like the ones you got in Florida is with humor, because in that scenario, it seems like the humor is a way of dissolving the darkness. And yet, in the excerpt that you've just read for us, I think what's so striking is that the humor is part of the darkness. And the absurdity and our ability to laugh in these times is precisely part of what alerts us to how dark they are. So I wondered if you could say a little more about
humor?
About what's going on for us when we laugh in the darkness. Is it a way of, is it a salve, or is it what makes it so bad?
No, I mean, you're quite right. There is an argument which says that this stuff is not funny and we shouldn't laugh. All I can say is that right now, living in the United States, I'm very grateful for comedians. I've actually found it impossible to listen to the straight news because I can't stand his voice. I just don't want to hear his voice, or his gestures.
It's this.
I think Jimmy Kimmel described this unforgettably as pinching invisible nipples. It's one of those images. Once you've seen it, you can't you can't unsee it. I think people like Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and Samantha Bee and not really Jimmy Fallon. He's not good at political comedy, But these people have been. Actually, they've been sharper political analysts.
Well, they get away with more than people think here. People say, "Oh, you can't criticize Trump and all this."
No, but they do.
They really do, and it's tough.
And they do it, and because they're funny, they get away with making extremely sharp political points. So my view is that on that experience, the comedy allows you to go deeper, and also to go deeper into people's consciousness, because if you laugh at something, to some extent, you've received it, And I felt that during the previous Republican administration, that comedians like Bill Barr and Jon Stewart and so on were really doing a public service, and I still think that. I mean, my problem is that it comes out this way naturally, I mean, I'm not good at serious writing, I get bored with it. I mean, I have very low boredom threshold, and I don't want to bore myself, first of all, because I think if I bore myself, I have a serious chance of boring you.
It's a good test, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here we are.
Boredom and embarrassment, those are the best tests for writing. If you're embarrassed about what you've written, it's not ready to show anyone.
It would be a good role for a political leader, wouldn't it?
Good title for a sitcom. Boredom and embarrassment.
Up here.
I think 4 people would watch it. Yes.
Me? Is this on? Yeah.
Where? Sorry, could you put your hand up so I can see? Oh,
Yeah.
there you are, yeah.
So I wondered if you could comment on how on earth the mantra "take back control" worked. It didn't seem to work in Scotland. It didn't seem to work for people on the television screens.
How the what?
Do we?
Take back control,
Oh.
which was the great motto of the 2016 referendum.
Yeah.
The Brexit referendum, coined and pushed by Dominic Cummings, who's now
Yeah.
Boris Johnson's chief
So we witnessed
advisor.
people on the screen thinking, or looking like they were thinking, "Do we have to listen to this nonsense?" You had people orating it who looked as though they were thinking, "Do I have to say this nonsense?" But it worked. What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I don't have any very profound observations about the Brexit business, except that I think it's a calamity on the edge of happening. This isn't, this country isn't going to take back power. It's going to lose a great deal of power. It's going to lose enormous influence in the world. It's going to be much poorer. And it's going to be very hard I feel, I have 2 children growing up in England. I feel worried for their future. And what will it be like when the door of Europe is slammed in their face? Instead of having the world open to them, there's going to be this tiny island, and I mean, it seems to me like in my lifetime the greatest historical mistake that I've seen a country make.
I saw a tweet the other day, which was some sort of thread that had been running on Twitter. People collecting the weirdest reasons they had heard for people who had voted Brexit. And this one was a chap who said he'd been in a charity shop and he heard a person who was serving there, out of a good public-spirited thing, working in a charity shop in the afternoons, saying that she had voted Brexit because the European Union had stopped them selling old toasters with dodgy wiring. Now,
So the
the
right,
idea that this was visited on them by Jean-Claude Juncker deliberately to
yes.
close down charity shops in
Yeah.
Bury or wherever it was.
Well, I mean, that's what's going to happen now. This country is going to become an old toaster with dodgy wiring.
You heard it here first.
And the fact that there is this dream England that is...
And it is England.
Yes, because it's certainly not Scotland. But there is this dream of England that has been foisted on people about this idyllic moment when there weren't any inconvenient brown people around and when everything was good. It's not unlike Make America Great Again, And it made me want to ask the question, exactly when was that? When is that golden age, to which we wish to return? And secondly, are you unaware that the pleasant life of that country was based on the rape, pillage, and exploitation of a quarter of the world? So, yeah.
Who's next? We've got a few more minutes.
Hand over there.
Hand over there.
Yeah.
Hand over there, mic over there. Good. Fire away.
Thank you. Given that you said that in America the Democrats have a tendency to shoot themselves,
Yeah.
who do you think should be their candidate next year?
Oh, well, look, I think it's down to 3.5. I mean, the 24, I think we can forget about.
Yes.
I think it's down to 2 old men and 2 women. It's Biden, Sanders, Warren and Harris.
Yes.
It's going to be one of them. And I think it's not going to be Bernie Sanders.
The one that Trump dreams of, surely, is Elizabeth Warren. She'd be Pocahontas from the
Yeah,
first
but I think
day
she
of
might have the best chance of beating him.
Do you think so?
I think she might. Because she's been very interesting. The way she's fought this so far is that she has not done any kind of personal attacks.
No, that's true.
She is concentrated entirely on policy issues. She has her slogan is Elizabeth Warren has a plan for that. you know, and actually,
But isn't she the epitome?
yes, but that might be. You see,
Of
I
the-
think here's my theory. I was wrong last time, so you know, pay no attention.
Not alone in that.
But that in a way, we live in a moment of opposites. So Trump wins because he's the anti-Obama. He's the opposite of Obama. So maybe what we need is the opposite of Trump. And the closest to the opposite of Trump that I can see is Warren. I think it might be Warren. I think she has a strong chance of being the candidate.
I know that there's a very, very strong argument that you can't elect as president somebody who's going to be 82 at the end of a first term.
Uncle Joe.
Uncle Joe. But America's a pretty grey country. Biden has got quite a good song to sing, which is, I represent the America you used to know, where there was a political discourse that was civilized, where when I was a senator for 32 years, we did deals on Capitol Hill to make things work, where presidents talked eloquently.
Yeah.
When
And he
the
was
little-
famously
the little man
the
and
deal
woman
maker.
was yeah, that's right.
He was the deal maker.
And I think if you're going to take on, if that's your political position, if you're going to take on Trump, having somebody who can deal with him by saying, you have single-handedly attacked the very culture, the sort of bits that are glued together in America that at its good moments made it work. I just sense that
Might
could
work.
hit a lot of people.
Well, there's definitely a job for you in the Biden campaign.
Well,
Look,
I'm just making a
the
point.
truth is, I like them all. You know, I like Biden and Sanders and Harris and Warren. I think they're all terrific people, and goodness knows, people of integrity in reply to a president probably more lacking in integrity than any president in my lifetime. And I would vote for any of them. You know, the question is, you know, I mean, I actually really like Kamala Harris. I think she's formidable. You know, and she could make mincemeat of him on debates.
Yeah.
But
that's what they said about the previous Democratic
well,
candidate.
I mean, Hillary was. Let's face it, Hillary was a bad candidate.
Yes,
No,
but I mean, she
A bad candidate who ran a bad campaign.
didn't know what to do when Donald Trump accused her husband of being a rapist in a debate in front of
Yes.
not just her,
I
but
mean,
him.
Yeah, the answer.
How do
is-
you respond? You're not
yeah, well,
trained to respond
Yeah,
to that.
well, one of
what
the
do you
answers
say?
to it is look who's talking.
Well, and she was criticised for not saying that.
Yeah.
But you can understand how in her mind was saying, "Oh, what happens if I say that?"
Yeah, well, I mean, she was just the wrong person, and she ran a bad campaign. That shows how beatable he is, because facing the wrong candidate who ran a bad campaign, he lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. That doesn't mean he's undefeatable. I like Harris. The question is whether America is ready for a black woman from California.
That's right.
I think, you know, the answer is we don't know. We don't any longer, none of the old rules apply.
Exactly.
Because according to the old rules, Trump was unelectable.
Yeah.
Unelectable, except he got elected.
Obama was unelectable until he got elected.
So we have to, old thinking just doesn't work anymore, you know, and that's why I think someone like Warren could actually be more effective than Biden.
A last word. You're very funny in this. You're full of vim and vigor, and of course there's anger underneath, but there's also a love of life.
Yeah.
Are you in a good state of mind?
Yeah, I'm not doing so badly, thank you. But it's
Well, that was what I wanted to know.
But maybe the love of life increases as you near the wrong end of it.
That's a very good moment in which to end. Ladies and gentlemen, just let me
Thank you.
just stay there. Just stay. I just want to remind you that Salman, of course, will be signing his new book, which I commend to you.